So, welcome back. This is the middle chunk of our lecture for this week. We're going to be looking at how our monopolies or imperfect competition is going to calculate their profits, their total revenue, and how they actually are able to control prices to some extent. So, over here, we have two graphs. So, on the left, we have our graph from perfect competition. We see that we have our normal supply. Remember, this is all firms combined. You go back a couple chapters, we looked at how we add up the supply curves horizontally to get that total demand at a price. And so what we see is that from an individual firm, that's this marginal cost curve over here, they only get a small chunk of the market, right? They just get a little market share. And the more suppliers there are, the smaller that share of total demand they get. And so they're sort of stuck. They're price takers at this horizontal price. They can't raise prices because someone will just come in and take all the customers at that lower price. They can't lower prices because they're usually at zero economic profit and they aren't going to lose money in the long run. But when we get to a monopoly, that's going to be this graph over here on the right. They actually get the whole market demand. So they don't have to share it with anyone else. They get the whole thing. And so what they're going to do is they're going to plot their marginal cost curve on here, their supply curve, and they're going to decide how much they want to charge, how much they want to sell. If they were operating at a competitive level, the perfectly competitive level would be to pick the quantity where that marginal cost curve hits demand. But because they don't have any competition, they can actually choose a different point. So let's say they don't like, P2, they want prices to go up to P1, they can just reduce their quantity to Q1. Now remember, they are limited by the demand curve. So they can't just pick any quantity and any price. So they can't say we want to charge P1, let's say this is $10 at a quantity of Q3. We'll just say this is 80. So if they want to charge $10, they can only sell 60. And if they want to sell 80, they have to charge, let's say it's $8. Okay, so they are limited by that demand curve. Sometimes we may have a high reservation price. That doesn't mean we like paying it. So, for instance, there's a little crack on my computer screen right now. I'm going to just keep this going as long as possible, but at some point I may have to pay to get it fixed. I may have to buy a new computer depending on what else is wrong. And, I'm willing to pay a fairly high price because I need this computer. It's crucially important to my job and my daily life, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be happy about paying for it. So if I want to go replace this computer, maybe it'll be $1,000 or $1,500 or whatever it is, and I probably will pay for it. Maybe I'll decide on a cheaper one, but I use this thing so much, especially for work, that I don't know, I probably will pay a higher price. Now, personally, I have a lower reservation price for computers than some other people, so I'm definitely not going to buy the most expensive model, top of the line, fully decked out laptop, but I'm also not going to buy the cheapest one, so I'm somewhere in the middle. I would be happier though if I could replace my same computer for $5, right? Or if it was free, or if it was $100. But just because I'm not happy about it, I will pay my highest reservation price to replace this if I have to replace it. And so monopolies can take advantage of that by charging a higher price. Now, later we're going to get into price discrimination, where sometimes firms can charge different prices to different customers. But for now, we're going to assume our monopolies are charging a single price. So they can reduce quantity if they want to charge $10. All 60 of their customers are going to pay $10. So they get to pick the price and the quantity in the market, but they are limited by that demand curve. And we are going to need to develop a marginal revenue curve. And the reason for that is because now with this downward sloping demand curve, we can't have this constant marginal revenue at the price. If they decide to produce an extra one, they want to increase quantity, then they're going to get less money than what they would have if they sold less. So not just less money for that next unit they sell, they're also going to get less money for all of the earlier units as well. So marginal revenue, remember marginal is extra. Revenue is how much they sell it for. So we'll say selling price. And in perfect competition, the extra selling price, it's just going to be that same price. Here, when we're talking about monopolies, it's going to be extra, we'll say extra money earned from one more. because it's not constant anymore. We actually now need a dynamic model where we have different marginal revenue for different quantities. And so because we have that downward sloping demand curve facing our monopoly, they also are going to have a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. So we're going to see decreasing marginal revenue. So as that quantity goes up, the marginal revenue is going to go down. That means they're going to get less money for each unit as they produce more. Marginal revenue curve has half the quantity intercept of the demand curve. This is going to be true only when we have like a straight line, a constant demand curve. We're not going to get into too many reasons about why this is right now. If you're very curious, let me know. I can send you some extra stuff. If you take some of the intermediate classes, you will get into this more. But you'll also be using more curved lines in calculus. So let's say we have our demand curve. Let's say it looks like this, and it intersects the quantity at 100. So our intercept is 100. Our marginal, so this is demand. Marginal revenue is going to start at that same point on the price axis, but it's only going to go halfway down to the quantity axis of 50. We could see this if we're looking at equations. We're going to just double wherever the quantity demanded is. So if our demand is price is equal to 350 minus 3 quantity demanded, then our marginal revenue curve would be price is equal to 350 minus 6 quantity demanded. Okay, so we just doubled that demand. If it's on the other side, so demand is equal to 2QD, is equal to QD equals 200 minus 4P. For our marginal revenue, we would say 2QD is equal to 200 minus 4P. So we're going to double the Q side. And in this case, since it's on that side, if we're trying to solve for equilibrium or something else, we actually need to divide both sides in half. And then we would say QD is equal to 100 minus 2P. Okay, so either way, we're just doubling the Q. If Q is on the left, it means we have to divide both sides in half. If Q is on the right, you just double it and leave it alone. And this is only true if we've got a straight line demand curve. Okay, so it's going to have twice that intercept there. And some of that is because the price is changing, and every time you lower the price, it impacts all of the earlier ones as well. So profit maximization for monopolies, we're going to use the same rule where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And in perfect competition, this is just where price equaled marginal cost. Now we actually have to draw our marginal revenue curve. So we're going to have a demand, a marginal revenue, and a marginal cost curve. And where these two things intersect is going to tell us our optimal point. Now, because this is now different from the price that's being charged, so marginal revenue is not equal to the price, we're going to have to be a little bit more creative when we're calculating things like total revenue, when we're figuring out what price our customers are going to pay us. It's not going to be the same as that marginal revenue point. So we're going to use marginal revenue equals marginal cost to find the best quantity to produce. And then we're going to use the demand curve and average total cost curve to actually calculate our profits or losses and those other things. So monopolies get to set the price and the quantity. They're still limited by the demand curve. They're going to use marginal cost, marginal revenue, and demand to determine production levels. So their profit maximization rule is they're going to start by choosing the quantity where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So on this graph here, that's going to be at point G. So point G is where marginal cost curve intersects their marginal revenue curve. And what they're going to do is we're going to use this to pick the quantity. So we're going to go down to that quantity axis and see what it is. So I'll draw a lovely little graph over here. So we'll say marginal cost equals marginal revenue here at a quantity of 75. We'll just say that this is at a marginal revenue of $5 each. Next, we need to find the average total cost, and we need to find the price. And to do that, we're going to go up from wherever our marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So G is going to be this bottom point, and then we need to go up to at that same quantity to find our other costs. The average total cost. Okay, so at our quantity of 75, we're going to go up to that average total cost curve and up to the demand curve. So average total cost, this is going to tell us our cost for production. And going up to the demand curve is going to tell us our price. So this is going to be the selling price. This is going to be what our buyers paid. And average total cost is going to be the cost of production. So this is what our sellers had to pay, cost of firms. Okay, so average total cost is the cost of firms. Go up to the demand curve to find the price, which is the cost to buyers. And you can see why our suppliers like this, because now they can have positive profit, right? We're able to reduce the quantity, make prices go up, potentially make that marginal cost go down. Sometimes we'll see we might have a higher marginal cost or higher average total costs than we would in a perfectly competitive market. But because they have the whole market, they're still able to make a higher profit. Monopolies can also have a loss, so they don't necessarily always make money. If that average total cost is still higher than the price, they can't make a profit. It doesn't matter how much they're able to charge. So if, let's say, here's our average total cost curve. If demand is over here somewhere, it doesn't matter. They can't ever charge a price that's high enough to make a positive profit. Okay, so our monopoly firms are still limited by demand. They're not able to always make a positive profit, but they are able to make more profit than if it was perfectly competitive. So we're going to calculate profit the same way, total revenue minus total cost. In this case, total revenue is going to be the price, so not the marginal revenue, because this is different than our price now that we're in imperfect competition, right? So price does not equal marginal revenue. So the price on the demand curve times that optimal quantity we found. And then total cost, we do the same thing. We're going to take that optimal quantity we found times the average total cost at that quantity. And then we're going to multiply, we're going to subtract, and then we're going to get our profit. So this can be positive, negative, or zero. It depends on where that demand curve is compared to the cost curves. And if they want a positive economic profit, price has to be higher than average total cost. We're also going to see that this is going to cause a dead weight loss. So any type of imperfect competition, because they can raise prices only through reducing quantity. So raising prices means less quantity. So it's not just that there's a higher price, it also means there's less being produced. Because if they didn't lower production, they wouldn't be able to sell it all. So let's say on this graph, I don't know what this looks like, 35, 34, we'll say this is $34 that they're currently charging. They can do that at a quantity of 200, but if they decided to make 300, right, then they're going to have like this surplus that they can't sell. And that's not good for profits, right? They've spent a bunch of money producing 100 extra units that they can't sell. So they're not able to raise prices and keep quantities high. The only way to get prices to go up is by reducing that quantity produced. And so that's going to cause a dead weight loss. We're producing quantities that are less than our social optimum. Producers like this because it increases their share of economic surplus, but it decreases total economic surplus. So firms have to underproduce to increase the price buyers are willing to pay. If they were producing where marginal cost equals demand, that would be our socially optimal level. So this point here I have in red, just put that as point A. This would be our perfect competition point. And we would say this is our social optimum. But our monopolist is going to produce a different point. Okay, so they're going to have a split point. So point B is going to be their best choice. And they're going to charge, say, $34. They are going to produce only 200. Whereas our competitive market would be charging around $25 and they would be selling 300. So you can see how we have a lot of loss in our market. How this affects our consumer and producer surplus. Well, first, our consumer surplus is going to get a lot smaller, right? So previously it would have been this whole larger triangle here, a perfect competition. But now with our monopoly, it's going to be this much smaller triangle up here. And from the producer side, they might lose a little from this triangle, but they gain this much larger rectangle over here. So this is transferred to producer surplus. And so our producer surplus becomes this lovely shape over here. If you want to make it easy to calculate, you can break it up into a triangle and a rectangle. So producers like it. They don't care that total economic is going down. So total surplus drops. Producer surplus increases. And consumer surplus drops a lot. Because the consumer surplus takes that whole hit of deadweight loss plus the extra that's now going to the producer side. And so we get deadweight loss. How do we calculate deadweight loss? So we can calculate that the same way as we did our consumer and producer surplus in previous chapters. So we're just going to do 1/2 base times height. And in that case, the base is this horizontal distance going from 200, so the monopoly quantity compared to the competitive quantity. So we have 100 for our base. And then height is going to be this distance here between the selling price and the marginal revenue or marginal cost at that same quantity. So in this case, it looks like this is about 15. This is apparently 34, so we'll just say 19. Okay, so 1/2 times 100 times 19, and this 19 is a dollar value. So we would say that in this market, our deadweight loss is $950. So there's $950 less consumer surplus, less total surplus than if we were producing 300. So consumer surplus actually drops by more than $950, which we will get into a little bit later. If you want to calculate the change in consumer surplus, you can see how it drops more than $950. So total surplus goes down by $950. Consumer surplus is going to go down by more than $950. And that is to compensate for the fact that producer surplus is going up. Okay, so we're going to stop here, and I'm going to start a new video where we go over the other types of market structures as well as price discrimination.